Rhein-Main post meeting. We are going to start today on our post updates being given by our post president, Scott Turrigan. So we will wait for Scott to get online. He's actually online and kick off our meeting for us.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for the introduction, and hello to the 26 people in the call already. We'll probably have a few more join in. And yes, Jessica, if you could please start recording. Great. All right, so good afternoon. Yeah, I'll soon turn it over back to Tim to introduce today's program on construction cost outlook. But I would first like to catch us up on our post recent happenings and our board member reports, since it's our first meeting in a while since we've been off doing other fun types of events. So first of all, on June 2nd, our post had our annual golf outing with 40 participants, and the weather was nice and beautiful for us. So besides having fun, we raised about $5,000 for educational initiatives. And following with lunch, we awarded those scholarships to 2 of the students that are off to university this summer. Britta is going to cover this in more detail. And of course, we handed over the trophy to this year's winning team, WSP. Congratulations. Then in July, our post, we participated in a joint European regional event. We gave a presentation to UCOM and AFRICOM. It was a hybrid event. Some of the post members from throughout the area went down there and others participated online, and we presented to them material from SAME's May time happening of the Joint Engineering Training Conference. There's a lot of great technical content presented there that some of us were fortunate to attend, and some of the staff members at the COCOMs expressed interest in hearing that material. So we presented it to them, but then there was also a lot of follow-on engaging discussion from the staff down there. So that's what we've been up to the last month, and soon we'll get to this month's meeting. So let me just run through our board reports now. But beforehand, as we know, please keep your cameras off and your microphone muted until the Q&A session. This is being recorded and it's going to be posted on our YouTube site, which you can also reach from our website at the link below. Here again is our list of all of our board members. We've been serving together since the start of the year and doing a great job. So thank you, everyone. The year is about halfway over, so if you're calling into this meeting and you're interested to get involved, whether to help us out or just to help make your own new connections, you really do get to know people better from being involved and hosting these meetings. Yeah, it's helpful. So we'd appreciate if anyone's interested to maybe serve in 2024, start thinking about it, and you can just join on with someone else or take a full role. So now I'll turn it over to Tim.
We've had a really strong list of programs this year, thanks to all the great participation of our members and our government colleagues. And that tradition continues as we talk about the construction market outlook in Europe. We're very fortunate to have an expert with us that will be talking about that. More on that later. Our post president has volunteered to lead us through a discussion on anti-terrorism force protection, which is fantastic. That will be next month. We have a few days outlined for next month, and we'll be in touch. But please be on the lookout for that, because that is a topic that is a challenge for many of us, depending on where we are and what we are designing or working with, or what type of facility it is. And then we're very excited to have our STEM TED Talk that will be virtual, because it's so close to the end of the first fiscal year. We realize people are very busy responding to certain requests for work and proposals and negotiations and things like that. So we are purposefully making that presentation virtual, and we'll have a great talk on our STEM program. Also coming up in October, we're hoping that we can get our government colleagues to present to us on the topic of value-added tax. As many of you know, that's again another sticky topic for us working in various countries throughout Europe. Every country seems to have their own tax regime, their own value-added tax exclusion forms, and certain requirements that they have. And I know if any of you are like me, we definitely need support in that area and hope to get some clarity and figure out what tools are available to us to make that a little bit easier topic for us to deal with as we progress through our projects. We will have cyber resiliency presentation on the 16th of November. I'll just point out that the reason it's so early in the month is because of Thanksgiving, but that will be an in-person meeting, so I hope a lot of you can attend that. That should be a really good discussion, as well as resiliency being a streamer topic for us for the post, an important topic, so I hope a lot of you can make it to that. And we will continue with our tradition of our holiday social and look forward to seeing you there on the 14th of December. As you know, past events can be seen on our YouTube channel. I think that's a great vehicle for us to go back to presentations that you may have missed, as well as future events can be seen on our Rhein-Main Post website. So if you are in question as to when or where present events are happening, there is clarity can be provided there. Scott, back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. All right, Chris, I see you're online, please.
Sure. Welcome to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are. We are very excited that we have a new sustaining member company in person. We welcome John Kelton from Banham Design, who has decided to join the Rhein-Main Post. So that's the big news for this month, and our total number of members is remaining pretty much steady. And if you move to the next slide, is again, we have a new company that joined our ranks, and so we are very, very happy to have now 27 sustaining members now in our post. And that's over to you, Scott.
Yep. Thank you, Chris. Nick Irwin, are you online? It seems not, so I'll gladly cover it. Yeah, the SME Leadership Development Program is open. So this is a good program that myself and a few others have been from. It's everything from reading books to monthly presentations by different kind of subject matter experts, whether it's on typical leadership topics or emotional intelligence. There's a nice variety, and it's nice refreshing topics to learn about. So yeah, we would like to send someone from the European region. So if you're a member and interested, please contact Nick Irwin at the bottom. And then Nick did a nice job of just listing here some of these references or like opportunities for professional development that are out there, especially if you're a government employee. For example, if you're interested in getting the PMP, there are some funded opportunities to attend the training for it. And then some also references for preparing for an interview. So this link will be, these are all links within the slide that you can access from our website. So check them out if you're interested. And Nick and the board is working through some details for our next social event, just so some of the young professionals can get to know each other better, build their network here, and have fun. And often they're open to the whole membership, even though it's hosted by us. So stay tuned for that. Britta, were you able to join us? Then I'm going to have to steal her very nice slide. So she put this together. I mentioned the scholarship recipients this year. We had a really nice award ceremony following the golf event. where we were able to gift the awards, the checks to two of the students that were able to come, along with some flowers, and their families were there. And it was a really nice event with the money that we raised from the participants. There's 40 participants in different companies. So thanks everyone for the donations, as we gave these scholarships to help some with some costs, as they're all off to university this fall. But here's some information on them. The different winners, that they were all very impressive students and backgrounds. So happy to help. Also, we do give a annual donation with money we raise throughout the year to the Wiesbaden High School robotics competition, or the robotics club. And Britta included a link here so that we can actually, if anyone's interested, see how the team's doing in their actual competition. Is Chandler online? I'll cover this one as well. But yeah, Chandler runs our outreach. He's the one giving the emails to you a lot. Also, Cherise is a big help still. So thanks, Cherise. But yeah, reminder that here's our website, where it's the first place to go to get any information. You can just Google SAME Rhein-Main post, and you'll find us. And yeah, keep a lookout for the news flash. The team does a really good job of this information, so we just get the key bullets to mark our calendars and be ready as these events come up, both for our I think I dropped off at the end, but yeah, back to you, Tim.
Oh, thanks, Scott. Yeah, and thanks for covering all those topics for our board members on that. Today's program, Cost Construction Outlook in Europe, is being presented by an expert in this area. We are very fortunate to have her presenting today to us. The fact that she took time out of her very busy schedule to give us some insights into what things are happening in the European construction market. And Edna Benavides, Benavides, very sorry about that, is a cost expert. She has 20 years of experience in providing this types of information. She has a bachelor's in architecture, a master's in construction management, and most recently is a member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. And she works with GLEEDS Cost Management. And we are delighted to have her speak to us today about the construction outlook in Europe. And Edna, I hand it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I'll share my screen very quickly. There you go. You should be able to see my presentation.
Yep, looks good.
We can.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. So thanks for the introduction and invitation to be here. I'd also like to thank my colleagues who are with us today. If any questions pop up throughout the presentation, feel free to raise a hand, ask a question, unless you guys generally wait until the end, whatever you're comfortable with. I know I have Felix online. Felix Bert is our country director for our office in Germany. And I think I saw Suzanne Turl online. She's our senior director for our defense portfolio. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, we should all be able to answer that.
Thank you, Edna.
Let's see. So my agenda for today will be just a brief introduction to who I am, my experience, my trajectory at GLEEDS, and then market intelligence, what I spend my days and nights doing now, and how I use that to help people plan for today and tomorrow. And lastly, effective quantity surveying. So, as Tim said, I have over 20 years of experience in construction, and I love it. I kind of ended up in this field as a happy accident. I originally thought when I was finishing high school, I'd study art history, and I ended up in architecture at Georgia Tech instead. And as luck would have it, I ended up living and working in Spain I've been here since 2004, which is when I first joined GLEEDS, and I started on this journey as a quantity surveyor or cost manager, as it's often referred to. In 2022, I was asked to lead the GLEEDS Intelligence initiative in Europe. We're a big team, a growing team in the company. The majority of people are located in the UK, but I concentrate my efforts on our countries here in the European region. So since a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is actually an image of my project locations that I've had over the years. And a happy coincidence is, or not a coincidence, but a lucky alliteration is that I've worked as far west as Alabama, as far east as Afghanistan, and then as far north as Paris and as far south as Panama. It's been quite a journey. Every project has definitely left a mark on my memory, and I remember them fondly. It's been an interesting process. And then GLEEDS. I work at GLEEDS. We're a global property and construction consultancy company with nearly 140 years of experience since 1885. We have a global reach across 6 continents, which means Antarctica is our last frontier. And we have over 2,500 employees. Most recently, we invested in starting the GLEEDS Intelligence Group. We were originally named Insights and Analytics, and we have progressed to GLEEDS Intelligence. That's our new brand, where I'm the acting lead in Europe. We, as I said before, we have several people from analysts, researchers to graphic artists. A lot of people are involved in creating the final product. So how do we do market intelligence at GLEEDS Intelligence? Well, I have a pretty set methodology that I follow every month, and it starts with using global resources that are neutral and reputable. So I use the OECD, the World Bank, the IMF, and Trading Economics. Now, Trading Economics has some subscription-based features, but its free content is really great for a quick snapshot on stock prices, on commodity prices. They have a section on raw materials that I sometimes check out. And they also have, if you go to their website, they have a spot where you can pick a specific country, and then you can get a GDP, an inflation, some projections. It's all very quick and concise. It's pretty good. I like to compare and contrast between OECD, World Bank, IMF, and Trading Economics to see what's going on amongst all of them and see how opinions fluctuate. Everybody's usually in line, but the numbers aren't always exactly the same. Next, I use item-specific resources that are key drivers in our sector. I started with Global Cement, Eurofur, which is a steel association in Europe, MEPS, which is a fee-based, generally, resource for steel prices. And during the pandemic, I added Freightos. Freightos gives us an image of what is happening with international shipping times and costs. It was, if you guys all remember when the Suez Canal incident happened, shipping costs went through the roof, but they were already on that trajectory. They were already moving upward because of other factors. So all of these have some free information available, but their data is typically fee-based. So you do have to sign up for some of the more interesting bits that they have to offer. But MEPS is a really good source, I think, for you can see on that image that I've included, they have articles that you can access. I think the articles are generally free to access, and you can see what the trends are. Now, what I have learned from checking all of these websites and reading their articles is that you have to understand the point of view of the person that's writing the article, right? So when MEPS writes an article about steel prices, they're always concerned when a price is going to go down, because for them and their audience, it probably indicates a reduced profit margin, right? If they can't sell their product at an elevated cost. But I see that as a benefit because I'm in construction, and I will hopefully benefit from a cost reduction or a cost savings when I go out to tender, when I go out to bid, and I get prices back. So when you read these articles, you always have to keep in mind the point of view of the person writing it, and if that is the same or different than your point of view. And lastly, I use the following local sources. So Eurostat is my first go-to. That's the European Union statistical website. And for today's purpose, because Tim indicated that you guys are in Germany and Poland, I use the Destatis website, which is the German statistical website, and Statistics Poland. Because I do intelligence across all of our European offices, I've gotten savvy at navigating over 15 different countries' databases. They generally pop up in their own local language. It's very easy to navigate. There's almost always a button at the top where you can change into English. Some of the more advanced websites give you the option to configure a user profile, and then you can save your data sets that you want to download every month, or you want to update every month. You can configure in your user profile, and then I don't know if they allow you to have like a direct to your inbox, but the Eurostat website definitely has a lot of features for you to set up a user profile, and so that it becomes easier for you to go back to the same data table every month. So these sources are all open sources that are free to use and free to reference. Okay, so is at the Open Commons copyright agreement that is universal, that you can use it and share it and reference it. The condition is that you don't change the data. You can manipulate it and you can come to conclusions and you can reference their website freely, but you cannot change the data. So once I have all of that, I have someone that helps me keep our data tables up to date. And once a quarter, we produce these market reports that are available on our website. So all of that research is going on, and this is the end result. They look really nice. We have quite a team of professionals dedicated to researching, editing, and designing so that I can focus on analyzing and liaising with our local offices, which I think is paramount to the success of these reports, that I'm getting that input from our local people on the ground, right? So Felix is on the call every 3 months. I send him an email. I say, Felix, it's that time again. Please let me know what's happening in your country, and let's see how we can give that back to our clients and people in the industry so that they can prepare for what's coming. I've included the links here so you can access the reports. These are from the second quarter. The third quarter Central European Market Report is launching next week. We typically launch on LinkedIn on Wednesdays. The Western Mainland third quarter report, I think, is set to launch towards the end of August, but I'll have to check our calendar on that one. So these, again, quarterly, every 3 months, one after another, usually a month apart between themselves. Okay, and once you get into the report, it's a beautiful website. You can scroll down, you can read it all, and if you scroll down to the bottom, let's see if the animation works. If you scroll down the page to the bottom, there's a little button just before you reach the end of it where you can click and download this PDF. Now, this PDF I call my 2-pager. I am just as busy as the next person. When I started this, I had a set vision in mind. I had a very clear vision that I wanted this to be short and sweet, easy to read. You can read it on your phone. You can read it while you're taking the metro or whatever transportation you have on a daily basis. And it gives you a snapshot. I typically start every report with a GDP graph and then an inflation graph with the inflation forecast, either from the OECD or the IMF is included, and then some local graphs on usually the industrial producer price index, maybe a local construction price index that's available. So, and this is all data that I get from reputable sources again. So it's not really something that is questionable. It's generally fact. This is the data that is being tracked across the European Union member states. As you can see, this is good. I have the updated one available here on the Poland report. The Polish team always gives me the fluctuation on unit prices for key materials. So rebar is one of the items here, and items like that, they update that every quarter for us. Okay, so those reports are quarterly again, which I said, so it's a good short-term snapshot. I don't like using my crystal ball too much. Clients always call and ask me and they say, I know, crystal ball, But there are ways for us to plan for what's ahead without having a crystal ball. There are things going on that we can use our best educated guess. So I'm focusing a lot on the biggest driver right now happening across the EU, which is the EU Recovery and Resilience Facility. This is the EU voted to invest 723 billion euros across member states in the form of loans and grants. So a percentage of that is free money, let's call it, and another percentage of that is loans that does have to be paid back. Each country, each member state had to supply a plan, which was then scored on how well it met the overall obligation to allocate at least 37% of their budget to green measures, 20% to digital measures, and other targets that they were required to meet. Their plan was scored, and then it was either accepted or rejected for revision. Throughout this whole process, a new energy component was created to address the European Union's dependency on Russian fuel. So that's a new item that countries are now incorporating into their overall plan. Now, this plan it sounds great, but the clock is ticking. It expires at the end of 2026. So countries are rushed to get projects started. And that's why I foresee a quick boom in the region in construction over the next 3 years. It will impact especially specialty contractors. And we'll look at that in a minute. So starting with Poland, I see the following items from their plan as construction intensive. So a 5 billion euro investment in renewable energy sources, a 7.5 billion investment in sustainable mobility, 3.5 billion in energy efficiency of public and residential buildings. So here, especially, I see state-of-the-art windows. I see facade materials that have improved thermal insulation. I see maybe solar panels for energy supply, right? I see things like this, and I see specialty contractors having to meet this high demand. I see, and this is across all of the countries, with all of these demands on energy type items, I see a risk, not a risk, but I see that there's going to be an upward trend in electrical pricing, in electrical distribution, so wiring, cabling, and mechanical systems, right? And again, the thermal aspect of all of this, so thermal insulation for facades, windows. You have to read between the lines when you look at these EU recovery plans to see how that's going to impact our construction sector. The next tool I use for local drivers comes from the Eurostat website, and this is the monthly construction survey. So each country in the EU sends a survey out to sector professionals, typically construction companies, and then they report back to the EU on common questions shown here. And depending on the question, the possible answer options are generally improve, which is a +1, stay the same, which is a 0, and decline, which is a -1. So the professionals in data analysis apply their formulas and provide us with a number that we can understand. Poland in particular, if you go to their statistical website, they produce their results directly, and they categorize their survey respondents by enterprise size. So you get the answer for companies that have 250 or more employees and less than 250 employees. And for me, what that says is that generally I work on very large scale projects. So I'm interested in general contractors that can cater to my projects, right? So I'm not concerned with the smaller companies. I'm interested in what the larger companies are thinking of. So I don't only look at the Eurostat website. Again, I go to the local statistical website and I download the same exact survey. But at the local level, there's usually a little bit more information. There's going to be their method statement on who they surveyed, what profiles they have. Like I said, it's generally to construction professionals as far as contractors, but sometimes they include consultants. It depends on the country and their approach. The EU, I think, on who responds to the survey has been flexible. On the screen right now, we're looking at the questions that they include as the basic starting point that generally everybody answers these questions. But again, some questions go into more detail. Some countries go into more detail. So here I've highlighted a figure that we'll go into and on the next slide, but I highlighted a figure that's experienced significant change over the past 12 months, which is price expectations, which I think we're all interested in today. In summary, I use this data across all of the countries I researched to gauge how contractors are faring. How do they feel? Again, this is the construction survey, and the big number they produce is the construction confidence indicator. So I use that to anticipate how well positioned they are to bid work, how hungry they are, how inclined will they be to negotiate. So this is a really good survey to put on your favorites on your browser. Okay, so Poland, their 3-month pricing expectation. First of all, I want to draw your attention to the table in the upper left corner where this is the complete snapshot of the data that's available on the Eurostat website. So they started in July of '93. And then the big graph on every slide will be the same. It will be from December 2019. If that date doesn't sound familiar, it's the last month before the pandemic started in Europe. And to the most recent data point, which is June of this year, June of 23. Okay, so here we can see that the dip was negative 22.3 points in April of 2020, so a month after lockdowns began in Europe. And the peak was 43.9 in April of 22, which was 2 months after the start of the war in Ukraine. So we can see, let's see, there's my mouse. So we can see how things are, as far as price expectations, people are less nervous. Let's leave it at that. They're less nervous than they were, obviously, at the start of the Ukraine war. Okay, so the construction, I think I skipped a slide. The 3-month employment expectations. This is another data point that I always check on the survey. You can see again, Poland's trajectory from 1993, I think is what I said at the beginning. So their dip was again in April of 2020, one month into the lockdowns at negative 42.6. And we are currently at negative 5.7 at the last report in June. And even though the figure is still negative, it's generally improving. The last table I'm going to share today is the overall construction confidence indicator. The historic table is very important because you can see that Poland has never had a positive number ever. And regardless of them never having a positive number, I think Poland has a good construction industry. I was surprised in the beginning when I saw this. So anyway, their dip again was in April of the pandemic, and now they are generally improving.
Edna, I have a question on that.
Okay.
And what is it that they have confidence in or not?
Okay, so the confidence figure is a combined score, taking into account all of the survey questions asked. And I think it's extremely important to take it with a grain of salt because as you can see here, they've never had a positive number. So you have to think about what's going on locally. You need to think about,
Right.
You need to take a lot of things into account. But yes, so the overall construction confidence indicator is a combination of all of the survey questions. The math is done. If you download the method statement, all the formulas are on there. They're available so you can see how they calculate it. But this takes all of those questions into account.
And in general, is it confidence in the strength of the construction market? So like a higher score would mean Polish people are very bullish
Right.
on
So a higher number would indicate that, one, they have good employment expectations over the next 3 months, that they
Right.
had good employment over the past 3 months, that their price expectations are positive, if that's a high number or a low number, but they're positive. If there's a material shortage risk, if there's a labor shortage risk, if financing is an issue for them to take on work, if their order books are full. So all of these things are calculated to come up with this overall number.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up the pace because I want to get into Germany too. So again, their EU recovery plan is 1.5 billion to transition to hydrogen, 2 billion for decarbonized vehicles, 2.5 in energy efficiency of residential buildings. Again, those thermal insulations, the solar panels maybe for energy. 750 million towards next generation cloud infrastructure. 500 million for building refurbishing childcare facilities, and $3 billion for modernizing hospitals. So you can see there will be a lot of money injected into the economy that requires construction. Again, their table, the numbers that I've highlighted are, let's see, price expectations over the next 3 months and factors limiting building activity. So this would be a shortage of materials, which is improving. It's going down. It's not a low number, but it's improving. Now, Germany's data tables here, the 3-month pricing expectation. Their earliest data point is from January of 1980, and January 2021 was the last negative figure, okay, which is very different than what we've seen in Poland and what we see in most countries. It has just dipped into the negative area again. The big difference here with Germany is that they were having a construction boom when the pandemic hit. I think we'll see that a little bit more. So their 3-month outlook is starting a downward trend. It's been very, I mean, we can almost say it's been linear. It's not as erratic as the one in Poland. And it's because of that boom that they were experiencing when the pandemic, basically where before it was difficult to find contractors to bid work because their plates were full, which impacted contract negotiations. Now they're less likely to turn down opportunities to fill their order books. So they're more hungry to bid work. And lastly, the overall construction confidence indicator, currently at 8.7, negative 8.7, sorry, which is lower than it was during the lockdowns. Again, they had full plates. Construction was booming despite the lockdowns and the pandemic. So, and to close out this section on how we can plan, these are some tables on construction-related raw materials that I use. And while these tables make everything look great, from our point of view, there are other factors that impact contract prices. So data can rarely be taken in an isolated environment. You know, look at plywood, that's significantly less than it was at the start of the pandemic. It's very seasonal, it goes up and down. Iron ore, which is your raw material for steel, aluminum. So all of these, but you have to also keep in mind that transportation, fuel, energy, labor costs, all of those costs have gone up, which impact the bid price that you get at the end of the day. Okay, so once I have all of that knowledge, what do I do with it? How can I use it to deliver a successful project? Well, that's where quantity surveying comes into play. This term is generally interchangeable with cost management. While the RICS formed in 1868 and has built the profession around science and methodology, all of us in the construction industry are trying to control costs in one way or another, even if we don't call it quantity surveying. So the RICS is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors in the UK. And they create all of the method statements and research. It's quite an association. If you want to check it out, they have a great website. And they've named the profession quantity surveying. Okay, so here for today's presentation, it's a simplified life cycle of a project. There's tons of examples available online. Generally, a project begins with an idea. So the inception, it goes through pre-construction, construction, post-construction, ops and maintenance, and decommissioning. So a quantity surveyor or a cost manager has a role in every phase. So these are services that are typically provided or delivered during the pre-construction phase of a project. Ideally, I'm going to focus on benchmarks. I think that's probably the most interesting for you guys. So ideally, a reliable benchmark will be used to set up project cost targets from the start. By reliable, I mean were project-specific influences considered when setting the cost target. So you have to take into account location factors, site conditions, procurement strategies, timescales, and especially your market conditions. The first figure a client hears is the last one they forget. So it's critical to get the first benchmark right to avoid creating false expectations. I imagine we've all suffered a project that went over budget, but was the budget reasonable to begin with? I'm going through this right now. The budget was not reasonable. They didn't take into account the location factor and things going on in the market. So we have a very tight budget. This is a case study, very briefly, the Vanguard Deep Maintenance Period Program in Devonport, where we provided pre-construction cost management services such as benchmarking. Again, so important to set your initial project budget, cost plans, design to cost reviews, project controls reporting, and report integration with client interface. So this is a graph I use. It's a very quick animation on what happens during the life cycle of a pre-construction, during a life cycle of a project. Tim, did you have a question?
I did. Yeah, can we go back to the previous slide on your example? Even though that's a beautiful graphic, that cost planning one. Sorry, I kind of ruined it. The you and I had talked about the fact that the U.S. government does benchmarking. They typically plan their projects a number of years in advance. They need to seek government approval for their budgets, for their projects, which takes a long time. So
right.
And then they have a rigorous CSRA process, cost schedule risk assessment process, which does take into consideration a lot of the things you're talking about. So you are singing to the choir. When it comes to, if I could put you on the spot a little bit, when it comes to benchmarking, what do you think is the most valuable tool when it comes to benchmarking a project?
I think your starting point, having historic data, and by historic, I mean recent.
Yeah.
So similar projects that have recent data that you can base it on. And then your location factor. If you don't have a project that is local to the area where you want to build, get a location factor. There you can, liaise with. That's something usually that consultancies will give you for free to engage in a conversation. Everybody's always interested to capture new clients. So it's very easy to call up your favorite consultant and ask them, what do you know about the market in Germany? Or what do you know about it in Italy? How does it compare to our most recent project in, pick a place, Bermuda? I don't know.
Well,
so it's really getting that location factor. And then the market, speaking with someone with local knowledge. I've seen so many projects fail because they didn't have a person with local knowledge involved in that benchmark to tell you, yeah, everything's great, but we're electing a new president next month and they're going to switch everything and licensing is going to become impossible. And he's going to make it illegal to import materials from another country, etc. You need that local resource of knowledge always.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks. So let's see, I'll let the animation run. It's pretty self-explanatory on how over time you lose the ability to save money and the cost to change increases. Right. So imagine you've already signed contracts here at the commitment stage and you start construction, and then all of a sudden you say you want to add 3 stories to your building. The cost to change that will be monumental, right? So the next one is also another animation. This visual shows what happens when a project doesn't benefit from cost checks throughout the pre-construction phase. So as a project progresses, if you go out to bid without doing any cost checks, you might end up with a nasty surprise, and then you get delay. You experience delays when you have to go back and redesign or figure out a way to bring it back into budget. But if you design to cost, where you have constant checks throughout, let's see the animation. Okay, so there, if you do a design to cost methodology, you can go out to contract with optimum contracting conditions, and you avoid the scenario that we saw on the first slide. Okay, so a typical estimate tables that I provide are broken down it's the same data, but I break it down into two different ways. One is by functional areas. So it's the functional areas of the building where I have, maybe in this example, I had management offices, I had a workshop studio, I had a retail space. This was for a fashion industry client. So they had their workshop was to sew the clothes or whatever product they were selling. They had back of house, etc. And in on the other table, again, same exact project. It's the same square meters and the same total amount. But here I broke it down into cost groups. So the work breakdown structure of demolition, site prep, substructure, superstructure, architectural works. And by looking at these two tables, I can pinpoint which one is causing problems to my budget, right? So here it was in the architectural works, they were spending a lot of money on finishes. And here it was in the workshop studios. Again, it came down to the finishes that they were choosing. Okay, so construction services, this is the last slide, actually. So the services for a quantity surveyor during the construction phase is contract administration, interim valuations and payments. So these are payment applications, change management, risk management, value engineering, conflict avoidance, and financial reporting. And that's it. So I can take questions. I don't know if I used up too much of your time today. And remember, Suzanne is on the call and Felix are on the call, my colleagues from Germany. Felix will have all that local knowledge you guys can use, and Suzanne has defense knowledge.
Your timing was impeccable, Edna. Thank you very much. No, that fantastic overview. We do have some time for questions here, and maybe I'll kick it off with one question. Obviously, so your example is from the private sector, and I think the government is always eager to learn and share lessons learned with the private sector and what's going on there. And one of the things you talked about was regular cost checks during your project. So during the CSRA project and during US government project, they do have set times where they check. Before I tell you what those are, just from your experience, what do you think is a good cadence for cost checking in the projects during the project?
So I've been, apologies if I use terminology that isn't standard American. I've been living in Spain for over 20 years or nearly 20 years. Typically what I see here in Europe is that we have an early deliverable of a schematic design. I've worked on, it wasn't literally a napkin sketch, but basically I've worked from a sketch that was just on a random piece of paper that the client brought me. That goes to a more formal schematic design, that goes to a more developed design, and then maybe your construction drawings, are those are your final pre-bid documents that you go out to tender with, right? You go out to bid with those. So at each one of those phases that I mentioned, schematic, early developed construction drawings, that's when we receive a formal deliverable, we estimate it, and then we have, if it's way off track, then we'll start with value engineering workshops. We'll start with some cost savings, looking for ways to get it back on track before we go out to tender. And because you have problems, if you waited to go out to tender, that's where you've got problems.
Yeah, and I think that matches pretty well with the CSRA process and cost estimate and value engineering that we have with government projects. And then one other question I have, you presented fantastic detail on construction outlook, the outlook from the perspective, and you gave the note of caution that there might be some subjectivity in the confidence index. What do you think the trend is going forward? Obviously, peak during pre-COVID and maybe a cooling off of some of the topics, supply chain constraints, inflation. How do you see that impacting the market? Just in a general view, your subjective view on that.
Okay, so generally, supply chain is not as much of a concern anymore because demand is going down. So there's not a material shortage because people are not buying like they were before. So steel is readily available. So much so that if you read on the MEPS website, factories, mills in Europe, especially Poland has a big steel mill industry. They've chosen to have partial closures. so that they can find a balance on their operating expenses and how much they're actually selling, right? So a partial closure means maybe they've gone to 3 days a week, or maybe they work 1 week a month. Every company is different. In Spain, we went through the same thing with our ceramics industry, tiles, sanitary ware, so your toilets, your sinks, anything that was porcelain, ceramics. The brick industry, when the energy prices went through the roof, they went to partial closures, so they didn't have to lay off everybody, right? They just said, everybody, we're going to work 3 days a week. So even though demand was going down, but supply, they also managed to bring supply down. So looking for that balance. So what I'm thinking now, as I've been speaking, is that when we look at the construction confidence indicator, is that price expectations, that figure is going down, but it's almost a false positive. That's going to improve the ultimate construction confidence indicator, but is that really great? Is a reduced price expectation great for us that want to go out to tender? So you need to, just because numbers go down and graphs look nice and things look better, you do have to apply a thought process and engage in dialogue with people at the local level always.
I think I've heard this referred to before, that thought process is looking at cost versus price, right?
Yeah.
And how that impacts it. We do have a hand up from our president, Scott.
Yeah, hi. So the presentation is very interesting. It's kind of new material for me and thoughts, but I find it interesting. It does seem the overall construction markets for these countries and regions. I'm curious, especially from your colleagues who are on the line, what different nuances are maybe for the defense type aspect and the type of construction we do. Does it affect us at all, or can we just follow this just the same?
I think Suzanne, there she goes.
Edna, thank you. And Scott, thank you for your question. It's an interesting point, and I think that in the UK, what's important to note from a cost envelope perspective is that which is benchmarked in the private sector or in the non-defence sector is a powerful indicator of what cost will end up being. However, as it will be for the sites that you're involved with in Europe and DoD locations, the same as Ministry of Defence locations where the work is taking place inside the wire, and so that requires a construction industry which is fit for purpose and has the ways of working and the personnel security clearances in place, which has a cost associated with it as well, and the ability to go into sites. So an example is a site that I visited yesterday for vehicle storage and support for those vehicles that in fact came back from the Rhine to the UK in the past 5 to 8 years, and the nature of the suppliers who can work in that space, and there's an additional premium associated with that. There's also quite a powerful impactor around risk, and I know you touched on risk and the client or governmental department's appetite to own that risk or to sell that risk to its supply chain, and that can also have a powerful impact on overall cost. Not least change, and change is particularly of requirement and scope, can seem that it's a simple grey shed that's required at the outset, but people get ideas and scope can creep, and actually, in my experience, the most powerful impactor upon cost over the lifetime of a program is around change of requirements or good ideas, which as a program manager, which is my background, we seek to control through regular engagement and building to what we call the minimum military requirement. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that all makes sense. But yeah, you elaborated in more detail. So thank you. Maybe one more question related to it is that does it somehow maybe also differentiate from the typical market? Maybe we can see residential construction is has a lot of specific considerations based on what's happening with the market, or might defense be a little more steady state? Residential development is an investor. They see opportunity they need to just build things while there's a large demand and the prices are low, but maybe the military doesn't follow that. It's just following mission requirements and not dependent upon the economic outlook.
Yes, and I think that's relevant, although I draw your attention to two aspects. The first being the way in which contractors are engaged, and professional services suppliers such as GLEEDS are engaged by government departments wishing to, and the Ministry of Defence wishing to build new infrastructure. That goes through a process of, as we call it, framework, mini competitions, and so we have to bid for our work. Sometimes work is presented in a way that is not particularly attractive to the market, and so that can create a constraint over who's got capacity and who's got the appetite to bid for that, even though in general major projects which in the UK are defined as 5 million sterling and above, and program that I was looking at yesterday is approximately 300 million of spend, that the long-termness of that will assist the market in determining where they pitch themselves on that spectrum of appetite. The other thing that's having quite a powerful impact at the moment is inflation, and where decisions, because our Ministry of Defence is an annualised organisation, different to the DoD where I've worked before. When funding is allocated to a particular programme of work, it is within an approval envelope, which might have occurred 2 or 3 years in advance, and the impact now of inflation around labour and materials has actually meant that some of that approval is unaffordable, leading to decisions to be made as to whether it occurs at all.
Okay, thank you.
If I can pick up on two of the points that Suzanne made there. Her first point being to risk, and interesting, all of those characteristics that you mentioned before, Suzanne, was we've all experienced that on this call, where depending on a contractor's appetite, we'll come in, we'll design what we think is to cost, and then you have price, which is the built-in risk on top of the cost. And we, unfortunately, going back even to 2018, have seen prices in doubling what we thought they were going to be costing. And that goes back to Edna's point about there being a construction boom, and contractors saying, well, if we can get this premium here, we'll do the work, but if not, we'll work on the private sector side, which goes back to Scott's other question: what is driving the defense market versus the private sector real estate market? And you correctly hit on that as well. It's similar for DoD. I love the term and cost envelope or budget envelope, that was developed a number of years ago. Same thing with DoD. And Scott, you'll know this, that activity will be driven not necessarily by financial gain or loss, but by the strategic direction that the governments want to go. And right now we see the European Deterrence Initiative just going full on in places like Germany and Poland, which makes Edna's presentation so valuable to us for today's discussion. So all of that super relevant to everything.
And Tim, Scott, if I may just close by observing one point, is that the design methodology, which is what this community is interested in the way that translates requirements in form, and design then is translated from that through your process of the US military's design charrette process, is a particularly well developed and I would say exemplar way of complex requirements and stakeholder opinion being brought together in a very formalized, very processed manner which informs that design helps to lock that in, which then can be costed, and then that risk of change is minimized, and that is not a process which is adopted in the UK.
Yeah, and it's a very good approach. Nonetheless, there are still good idea fairies out there at every stage of the project, and they will fly in and suggest change that somehow picks up traction just after the 65%, which according, on Edna's chart drives cost up. Not always helpful, but that's what we're here to. We're agile, and we will adjust to client requirements as they see fit. So I would give it another second to allow any other questions that we have. We have hit the top of the hour, but I think that's probably it. So Edna, thank you very much for.
Thank you.
Fantastic. That presentation was so far above my personal expectations that I thought we could get from somebody just volunteering their time and effort to come out. So thank you very much for that. Really spot on, as they say in the UK, and
welcome.
And great information for this whole crowd. So thank you for
My
that.
pleasure.
Normally we would have a gift to give you, but and that is Scott's department. So I will hand it back to Scott, and
Okay.
Thank you very much again. Thank you. Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks.
Scott, over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim, for putting together another good program, organizing this, and Edna, thanks for this great presentation. As a testament to, I guess, its value to the community here, we had 43 on at peak and 39 on still, even after all the Q&A. So it definitely has the interest of those that were able to attend. So thanks for adding that to all the engineering community out throughout Europe doing this Department of Defense work.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me today. And I liked the data, 43 at the peak and 39 at the lowest. Excellent.
There you go. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks.